Hi there, I'm Jonathan Larson. I'm an extension entomologist with the University of Kentucky, and I'm here today to share some information on yellowjackets. We've been receiving a lot of inquiries about yellowjackets, particularly in eastern Kentucky here in the year 2024, and I wanted to provide some information about their biology, about what may be going on to be causing so many of them to be in flight, and then what we can do if we're discovering lots and lots of yellowjackets in a given area. Yellowjackets as a species are a kind of relatively smaller wasp. They are related to hornets and paper wasps. These are their closest living relatives. They look very similar to hornets. They can also look very similar in profile to paper wasps. We call them yellowjackets here in North America because of their bright yellow coloration, which is mixed with that black that's also on their body. It looks a lot like a soldier or a uniform, and so we've referred to them using this kind of nomenclature as a yellowjacket. In many other nations that have yellowjackets on the European continent, they would refer to these just as the common wasp. But here in North America, we have a special name for them. They can be distinguished from some of their close relatives, those hornets in particular, based on their size. Yellowjackets are relatively small when compared to other stinging insects. If you compare them to a true hornet, there is only one true hornet that lives in the state of Kentucky, and that's the European hornet. The yellowjacket looks quite small in comparison. There are other insects that are called hornets here, in particular the bald-faced hornet, which is actually more of a type of yellowjacket, and it's a bit of an intermediary between these two groups. So it's smaller than a true hornet, and it has some similar coloration to what we would see with a yellowjacket. The location that a nest or the type of nest that's constructed can also differentiate a yellowjacket from some of these other more common types of wasps. If we look in this little box with some collected and preserved insects, we can see a yellowjacket in comparison to other species of stinging insects. One of the most common ones that they're compared to would be the European honeybee. Those of you who keep bees may recognize this very cute and kind of cuddly pollinator that many people prize. They look very different when you see them side by side, but these two are often sort of talked about interchangeably. The yellowjacket is much balder when compared to a honeybee. It's a brighter yellow color compared to the honeybee's kind of dull golden brown color. And then we also have the attitudes. We can't see that at play here in this little box, but yellowjackets are typically more aggressive, just kind of on the outset compared to a honeybee. We can also look through this box and see it in comparison to a cicada killer, which is another large insect that people fear, the European hornet, as well as the bald-faced hornet that's common in Kentucky as well. And you can see just how relatively small the yellowjacket is when compared to these other stinging insects. Yellowjackets also have a distinctive coloration. So they're this half-inch long size. They have that bright yellow color, which is a little different when compared to other species, particularly because it lacks any other contrasting color. There's no orange here. There's no reddish color. It is simply yellow and black, and brightly colored at that. There are multiple species of yellowjackets that live in the state of Kentucky. We could point to things like the German yellowjacket, the Western yellowjacket, aerial, eastern, southern yellowjackets, and we differentiate these organisms based on patterns on top of the abdomen. If you look, it kind of looks like they have a penguin's cartoon face on top of their abdomen. These bands on the back of the body. If we look closely at the German one, for example, it looks kind of like a happy cartoon penguin. If we were to compare that to the aerial, we would see a much angrier cartoon penguin, kind of like the eyebrows are slanted down. I will say that it is usually sufficient enough to know that it is a yellowjacket. We don't normally need this kind of species level identification, particularly if you're being attacked and stung. You probably don't care specifically what scientific name or what species it is that's attacking you. It's good enough to know that it's a yellowjacket. Yellowjackets are the most likely candidate in an insect stinging case. There are other possibilities, including honeybees and bald-faced hornets, as well as bumblebees, paper wasps, such as the European paper wasp that you see here in this collection of images. That's the one that looks a lot like a yellowjacket, but it has orange feet and orange tips to its antenna in that center of that bottom row. And then we've also got paper wasps, which can sting. Yellowjackets, though, by far make up the majority of stinging cases that we experience here in Kentucky. This is even in comparison to other stinging insects like stinging caterpillars or velvet ants or other things that you could discover here in the bluegrass state. So they are aggressive, they can sting, it is not very comfortable. Their stinger is located at the tip of their abdomen. It looks a lot like the other stings that we see on insects like a honeybee. It is a modified ovipositor, which has been attached to a venom gland rather than to an ovary. And so instead of delivering eggs, it most normally is going to deliver venom into the body of kind of an unsuspecting victim. The differences that we see amongst stingers are really keen when we look between honeybees and then things like yellowjackets and bumblebees. Honeybees have barbed stingers, so if you're stung by them, their stinger is pulled out from their body, also removing some of their key organs. So it is a death mission if a honeybee is to sting you. On the other hand, a yellowjacket, a bumblebee, paper wasp, these things have straight stingers, which means that they're able to sting repeatedly until they're running out of venom. So it can be much more painful to encounter these organisms because you may get a higher dose of venom delivered into your body. And they can be so angry and aggressive, they'll just keep poking you even when they run dry. They're just stabbing you with this reverse needle there on their rear end. There's a lot of different chemicals that you can find in yellowjacket venom and bee venom that can induce the pain and sort of allergic symptoms that we associate with these stinging incidents. I won't go into detail with them, but suffice to say there are histamines, there are things that destroy some of your blood cells, there are pain-inducing components, and it's unfortunately something that sends a lot of people to the hospital here in the United States. The National Pest Management Association, or NPMA, they estimate that about 500,000 Americans visit the emergency room every year as a result of encounters with stinging insects like yellowjackets. And it should be noted that yellowjackets, other wasps, honeybees, these organisms are responsible for about 50 deaths in America every year. This can include allergy or allergic responses to these organisms. It can also include things like traffic accidents. We have people that get yellowjackets or bees in their car and they become distracted and kind of swatting at these things. And unfortunately, this can lead to an automobile accident. So there are unique situations that pop up with them as well. If we wanted to talk more specifically about yellowjacket biology in a state like Kentucky with our climate, we're going to see overwintered yellowjacket queens emerge right around April or May, depending on the temperatures. And then that queen who spent the winter hiding out in leaf litter or loose bark on trees, she is going to construct the initial stages of her nest for that calendar year. When she does this, it looks a bit like an upside down teacup with some cells on the inside. And at first, she's the only wasp in the nest, so she has to do all of the work. There is a social strata structure to a yellowjacket nest, just like we see with honeybees and bumblebees and a few others. Usually the queen is inside the nest laying eggs, but at this juncture in the year, she doesn't have anybody to help her. So she has to forage for all the food, she has to construct the nest, and she has to raise the first brood of baby yellowjackets all on her own. As she does that, though, those workers are going to mature and they're going to start taking over responsibilities in the nest. Now, the site that she chooses to construct her home in can vary by species. Some of them will build in trees or shrubs. Some of them will build at the end of a tree branch. Others will build down in kind of the deepest, densest part of a shrub, trying to hide their nest from prying eyes. Some of them will use wall voids or spaces in your attic or your soffit, any gap that they can find in a building, a home, or an outbuilding structure. Many of them, though, are going to nest in the ground. Yellowjackets tend to prefer to be in the ground, where they'll find abandoned rodent burrows and they will begin to construct their nest and expand it. When we have this nest being constructed, we can look inside. This is a dissected hive that we have in the lab here. This shows you the kind of tiered system that they will ultimately build. These combs will hang from a central point at the top of the nest, and it is surrounded by this papery substance that you see here that they're using as sort of a protective football. It's a force field that covers the inner comb, which is actually where a lot of the action is happening. The workers are the ones that construct this bigger nest. So as it expands, it takes on kind of the proportions of a football and then a soccer ball towards the end of the season. And this is all clustered in an area underground or in a wall void or inside of a shrub. And this is where they all live. This is where they take care of their young. It's where they depart from to go and forage. It's where the queen sort of lays all of her eggs. So this is a very important area to them, which means that they will defend it very vociferously if they have to. At the start of the season, yellowjackets are interested in protein. Yellowjackets appear to be predatory organisms because they're out hunting for things like caterpillars and spiders and all kinds of other insects. You could even consider them beneficial at this point in the year because they do sometimes help to suppress pest caterpillar species. They'll also visit things like your sandwich. If you leave a piece of ham sitting out, they will visit roadkill and garbage. And in all of these spots, they're cutting off, little steaks, little chunks that they take back home, and then they feed to the immature honey or yellowjackets that are inside of the nest. They don't actually consume this themselves. Yellowjackets are very interesting in their diet as adults. They have a really, really potent sweet tooth, and they're looking to feed on sugary materials themselves most of the time. The primary source of sugary materials for them at the early part of the year are the larvae themselves that they're feeding. They will feed them these, ham sandwiches, opossum steaks that they find on the side of the road, and that larva, and as a result, will produce a sugary substance that the adult then drinks up. It's a very weird sort of relationship that they have where they feed these babies and then they kind of eat the baby's poop. That's really how their diet works, and it's kind of striking, I think, in comparison to other wasps. What's interesting about this time of the year is that we're starting to move into a period where they're not producing more workers. The queen is switching to producing only male yellowjackets as well as new queens, which will then mate at the end of the season so that those queens are fertilized. The original queen, all of her worker force and all of those male yellowjackets will perish right around the first hard freeze here in Kentucky. Only those new queens that have mated will find areas to hide in and overwinter to go into the next calendar year to begin the process all over again. So as a result, yellowjackets are more frequently out and about foraging for sugary materials. There's less larvae for them to be able to feed from, and so they need to find the sugar fix on their own. This leads to them showing up at parks, at state parks and local city and county parks. They show up at county and state fairs. They show up at festivals, outdoor picnics, any venue that provides a lot of sugary material, which can include fruit juices, soda pops, fruit pieces, pies, other desserts, cotton candy, anything that's full of sugar that can be slightly liquidy. That is what they are going to go towards, and they're going to eat it up. This unfortunately means that sometimes we drink yellowjackets because they're down in our lemonade or in our Coke can. It means, unfortunately, that when we go to drop the trash, occasionally we disturb yellowjackets, aren't attacked. And so we have to do something to try and prevent these kinds of interactions. The other thing that's a problem at this time of the year is if we discover the nest, these yellowjackets will be much more defensive than they might otherwise have been earlier in the year. That's because they need to protect those queens. Again, this is the only way that their genetics go from 2024 into 2025. So they have to keep those queens alive. If you mow near the nest, if you weed whack near the nest, if you're doing anything in the vicinity of their home, they are very likely to come out. The guards will alert the other wasps and they will arrive to sting you. And it's a very, very uncomfortable situation when they do. Now, one of the big questions that we've received over the last couple of weeks is, why is this happening? Why are we seeing so many of these yellowjackets in Appalachia? What is the cause of this situation? Because we've also seen reports in states like West Virginia as well as Tennessee, all of it kind of along the mountain range area. What I'm looking at is basically probably that we've had a lot of mild winters. If we look at temperature data, which I'll project for you here, this is from the Jackson, Kentucky weather station, the NOAA station that's there. If we look at the top 6 warmest winters on record, 6 of the top 6, 4 of the top 6 have happened in the last 4 years, back to back to back to back. If we have these kinds of mild winters, it could ultimately mean that there are more queen yellowjackets surviving this cold period, and there's more of them to found nests in the next spring. If we have successive years of more and more queens, unfortunately that could just mean almost a multiplicative effect, where we have more and more of these yellowjackets surviving, thriving, and being able to build in areas like eastern Kentucky. There's also the potential that these warmer winters have helped some of their food resources. We may also have had pest outbreaks that we weren't fully aware of, things like caterpillars or sawfly larvae, which these organisms could prey upon and feed to their nest. That could have resulted in the colony doing better earlier in the year. Or maybe we have a sugar-producing insect, like a scale insect, that's thriving right now, providing a lot of sugary material for these insects to eat. We're getting a lot of reports of them hovering and behaving kind of strangely in otherwise sort of normally yellowjacket-free areas, which gives me pause and makes me believe that there could be some sort of resource we are not fully aware of that they're taking advantage of. If we want to do something about this, there are a variety of ways that we can cut down on interactions between humans and yellowjackets. Some of this boils down to sanitation. We can't have open trash cans outside that are overflowing with garbage, which is just providing a lot of free food for these organisms. It's better to have a sealed trash can with a tight-fitting lid that's emptied regularly outside so that we cut down on resources for them to forage on. We can also do things like constantly turning our compost piles to restrict their access to food or to restrict their ability to build a nest in a compost pile. We have had some questions about that. We can try to take care of dumpsters that may be near our business or our home, make sure that they're a little more clean than usual, make sure that there's a lid that's closed on there to try and cut down on access. If they're getting into your home, it would be best to look for gaps in caulking around windows or holes in things like screening. We have had questions about what to do if you're kind of hiking around, doing a nature walk, maybe farming or doing some other outdoor activity, and you happen upon these big swarms of yellowjackets that are kind of flying or hovering in the air. The best thing to do is just to back out the way that you came. Don't try to forge your way through those yellowjackets. It is possible that you could make it through, but if you were to disturb any of them, or you were to start to swat or sort of wave your arms around at them to try and disperse them, they will get angry and they will probably respond with some stinging, which could induce more stinging, and unfortunately that will be very painful for you. So your best bet is to simply walk backwards from whence you came and go and find another path to your destination, or maybe simply go home and admit that the yellowjackets won that day. Some days you get the bear, some days the bear gets you, as they say. We are also promoting the use of trapping against these organisms. Trapping is very helpful when we have large numbers of any insect, and in this instance, it's one of the most passive, kind of easy ways to manage yellowjackets. You can go about this in one of two ways. You can construct a trap on your own, or you can buy a pre-made one. There are lots of varieties of traps that are out there. The pre-made ones look kind of like a mustard bottle from a hamburger diner, just upside down and full of yellowjackets rather than delicious mustard. You can buy these online or from hardware stores. You simply have to bait it with something sugary and sweet, and then the yellowjackets will go in through the nozzle at the bottom. They're forced through a cone on the inside, and then they can't get their way back out. They usually cook to death inside of these traps. The ones that we can make at home, though, are going to usually look like what you see here. This image of a 2-liter bottle where the upper 1/4 or 1/3 of the bottle has been cut off and then turned over and squished into the rest of the bottle to create a funnel that leads into the bottom of the 2-liter pop bottle. You just fill the bottom of the bottle up with something like apple cider, apple juice, orange juice, pop, lemonade, anything kind of sugary. Put a few drops of dish soap in there, not foaming dish soap, but liquid dish soap. It breaks the surface tension, so when the wasps fly in through the funnel, when they hit the liquid below, they sink to the bottom and they will perish. I would deploy several of these on my property if I were seeing hundreds or thousands of yellowjackets, and eventually you'll catch quite a few of them out and you'll be receiving fewer visits from them and less pressure from them. There are variations on this that can include a tray of water or a tray of sugary material with soap in it, a tray of soapy water that has a piece of chicken or other protein as a bait on usually a rod of some sort that kind of goes over the middle. You can find lots of variations of this online. You can also use insecticides against these organisms. Typically the aerosol products are going to work the best, but it is contingent that you know where the nest entrance is to use something like an aerosol product. The same is true for insecticidal dusts. 7 dust is one possibility. I didn't put it on here, but these are some other versions that you could buy of dust type products. This would be poofed into the nest entrance, and then you can do that with a turkey baster usually, and it will coat any yellowjackets that go in and out of there. I will say the aerosol products work faster and maybe a little safer. They also have specialized triggers so you can shoot them from a greater distance rather than having to poof the insecticide in the nest entrance while you're standing next to it. We've had questions about, can we just spray our whole yard and then that will soak down into the ground and kill the yellow jackets? Unfortunately, that's very unlikely to happen. Almost anything that we would apply to the soil will be bound to the soil and it will not leach into the nest and provide the control that you want. No matter how what type of product you choose, it is inherent that you get it into the nest entrance. So this requires some observational skills, watching to see where the yellow jackets are going in and out of, if it's on your home or near your home, and finding that nest entrance so you can fire the product down in there. If you choose the aerosol or the dust, I highly encourage you to apply your product at dusk or at night. This maximizes your control. There's going to be more wasps in there to be killed. Also minimizes your chances of getting stung because they're kind of winding down for the day. But no matter when you do it, what you're using, always have an escape route in mind. Know where you can go to get to safety, just in case the product does fail. Maybe something goes haywire, maybe it's squirting out the other side of the nest. There are things that can occur that make it seem like the product is failing. If that happens, you want to be able to get out of there as quickly as possible to try and protect yourself. We appreciate everybody that's been reporting the situation to us. If you see anything else that's weird with yellow jackets this year, we hope you'll consider contacting your local extension office, and then they can filter that information to us here on campus. You can also find some of our resources at our entomology website, where you can read about some of these stinging insects like yellow jackets and cicada killers and others. And hopefully this will wind down very soon. The first hard freeze will wipe most of this problem out. And hopefully we have a normal winter this year, and maybe that will break the cycle and we won't see this happen again in 2025. Thanks for watching, and we'll look for more bugs to teach you about here in the near future.